let's talk about the Shelby Harris signing in more detail and what it means for the Browns. Because on the surface level, Shelby Harris isn't some all-pro, Pro Bowl level tackle. But I think this signing is going to pay off big time for the Browns. And I'm going to explain why in today's show. But let's get some background information in case you missed all the news yesterday. Shelby Harris signed a one-year contract with the Browns worth up to $5.2 million. And he's got a lot of experience in his NFL career. Entering his 9th season, was with Denver for 5 years, even led them in sacks 2 seasons ago in 2021. But last year he was in Seattle, and you can see his numbers over the last 4 seasons. He's had some really good years as a pass rusher, and all around, he's a very solid defensive tackle. So what's all the hype about, right? What's all the hullabaloo about Shelby Harris signing? Why is this going to change the Browns' defensive line? Well, when you look at Cleveland's defensive line, Andrew Berry has completely reshaped it. He brought in 3 new starters, Dalvin Tomlinson, Shelby Harris, and Zadarius Smith. Those are all 3 either free agent signings or trade and then a new contract reworked. Those are not cheap moves, right? Andrew Berry could have been poor and just rolled with Tommy Togiai or Jordan Elliott or a cheaper signing like Tristan Hill, Maurice Hurst, or a rookie in Ika. But no, he knows that this season is a must-win opportunity, so he's going all chips in. He is not holding anything back, and if that means paying $5 million in August to get another starter into your rotation, he's going to go out and do that. But this is why I really think the Shelby Harris signing pushes the Browns' defensive line over the top, and it makes them, well, I think a top 5 defensive line. Because when you look at Cleveland's defensive line last year, specifically the defensive tackles, there was not much to fear here. This was not a good unit. Andrew Berry knew going into 2022 that Jordan Elliott and Taven Bryan as starters would not be a top half defensive tackle rotation, right? But he was banking on, well, with Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney, I don't need them to be the best run-stopping crew in the league. They just can't be the worst. Well, fast forward to the end of the year, and they were one of the worst teams in run-stopping. Now, this is why it changes, because look at the additions that Tomlinson and Harris bring in compared to last year's starters in Jordan Elliott and Taven Bryan. I mean, 86 tackles for Tomlinson and Harris compared to 62 for Jordan Elliott and Taven Bryan. More tackles for loss. Give the edge to sacks to Elliott and Bryan. But look at the stops. And what does stops mean? It means a time a defensive player makes a tackle that is a loss for the offense, whether that's a tackle for loss or no gain. But basically, you don't get a brownie for making a tackle 10 yards past the line of scrimmage. At that point, it's too little too late. 47 stops for Tomlinson and Harris. Basically 47 times those 2 players combined to make a really good play as a defensive lineman, compared to 28 for Jordan Elliott and Taven Bryan. In the PFF average grade for those 2 players, Tomlinson and Harris, 25 points higher than Elliott and Bryan. Shelby Harris adds great insurance to this defensive line in case an Dalvin Tomlinson injury pops up, and they are right back to where they were a season ago of Jordan Elliott and Tommy Togiai rotating in there. Sure, you got some new blood in Siaki Iko or Maurice Hurst or whoever was going to get that last defensive tackle spot. But now, if you do go down one DT, you still got another really good one, whether it's Shelby Harris or Tomlinson. As long as you got one of those 2 guys in your lineup, it's going to be a much improved run-stopping unit, where if you didn't sign Shelby Harris, you were 1 snap away from having the 2022 Browns run-stopping unit out there. But it also really deepens their rotation. And I'm going to expand on that in just a second, but let's get ready for week 1. I can't wait. This is why I say football is not back in the preseason, because now we got a taste of what's going to be an elite defense in my eyes for Cleveland, and we got to wait a month. So if you cannot wait for week 1, spam me down in the comments section. I can't wait to beat the Bengals. And by the way, quick self-plug, subscribe for our watch party tomorrow for the Browns-Commanders Week 1 preseason game. We're not going to go live today. We usually have live shows every Thursday, but because of the game tomorrow, it just doesn't really make a ton of sense. But make sure you subscribe. That way you do not miss out on a ton of fun, and that is a Browns Report watch party. So let's take a step back here, and let's look at the new revamped defensive line for Cleveland, because I think these are going to be your 4 quote-unquote starters. You're going to get a rotation. You're going to get Okoronkwo in there for sure. But if you want your 4 starters, these are your 4 guys. And there is a lot of talent between these 4 players, right? None of them ranked outside the top 20 of their respective PFF ranks. You can see the stops are way ahead of where this unit was last year, where you had Myles Garrett, but then next to him was Jordan Elliott, Taven Bryan, and Jadeveon Clowney, who don't even come close to what Tomlinson, Harris, and Smith all did a season ago. But I want to take a bit of a zoom in on Myles Garrett, because Myles Garrett, in my eyes, is, if not the number 1 edge rusher in football, top 3 at very worst. But Myles Garrett, kind of interesting stats here. At least I found him interesting. In the month of September in his NFL career, he has 22 sacks in 17 games. In the month of October, where he's played the most amount of games, and that makes some sense, 27 sacks in 23 games played. But look at the drop-off. Sure, he's played less games in November and December than October, but so much less that it goes from 27 down to 9.5 and 12.5. This is what I was talking about a moment ago, about that defensive line rotation getting even deeper, because few offensive lines are going to be able to keep up with this deep rotation as we get into those later months, where unfortunately Myles Garrett hasn't had a great supporting cast throughout his time in Cleveland. So as the season goes on and he starts to wear off a little bit, well, he doesn't have anyone picking up the slack or anyone drawing attention and allowing him to go at 100% all year long, because he's working by himself so often that it's hard to keep that same stamina and same energy for 17, 18 weeks. But now that the Browns have a very deep rotation where they can get new guys in there like Okoronkwo and Zadarius Smith and Shelby Harris, Jordan Elliott, Dalvin Tomlinson, well, offensive lines can't just focus on Myles Garrett. They also have to focus on all these other players, and that's going to keep Garrett a little bit fresher going into the second half of the season. Now let's look at the second half of the season because, well, what do you know? The Browns' last 10 games of the year, the months of November and December and into January, they don't play many good offensive line teams. I mean, these are just the PFF rankings going into 2023, so they're not the word of God, but it's a good stab at what to expect for a lot of those teams, and I mean, none of them really look outside of the Ravens' top 5. You only had one team in the top 10, and even if you have a margin of error of 5 spots where, hey, PFF's not going to be dead on exactly, but give them 5 spots of wiggle room, they only had 3 of those 10 teams finish in the top 10 of their PFF offensive line rankings. So the Browns are going to have a lot of teams with so-so to bottom-tier offensive lines going up against a very fresh defensive line, and Shelby Harris coming over, that's going to just keep those legs even fresher in the second half of games and in the second half of the season. And that's why, sure, Shelby Harris might not be some Pro Bowl tackle, but he is an above-average tackle. And he's going to create a good rotation, and that's going to allow Myles Garrett to feast for 4 months, 5 months of the season, and not just the first 2. Now, before we get on to the rest of the show, BetUS, our sportsbook partner, wants me to share an awesome deal with the Dog Pound, and that is going to chatsports.com/bet and entering promo code Browns125. Preseason week 1 tomorrow. Ride with the over with me. It's the best way to take in preseason football. But you got to use that link along with that promo code to get the 125% deposit bonus. Throughout all this, I haven't even mentioned maybe the cherry on top, which is Jim Schwartz, one of the best defensive minds in football, a Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator, a guy that sure doesn't have a hugely successful track record as a head coach, but I don't know, got the Lions to the playoffs. Like, that's not a very easy thing to do in Detroit. But Jim Schwartz, there's been a lot of moves made this offseason for the defense, but this one might be my actual favorite because Jim Schwartz, as we all know by now, is here to do really one thing, and that is get after the quarterback. That is let his dogs up front feast. I mean, you look at his track record, he's had a lot of players who have had career-high sacks under his command. Fletcher Cox in 2018, 10.5. Marcel Darius, 10 sacks. Mario Williams, 14.5 sacks. Ndamukong Suh, 10 sacks. There is a long list of players who have had their best seasons when Jim Schwartz was calling the shots. And good news for the Browns is they got a lot of good pass rushers. So Jim Schwartz is going to open things up for them. He's going to put them in the best spots to be successful. And then you get a beautiful trickle-down effect where the linebackers now aren't being met at the second level by guards and tackles because Tommy Togiai is getting blown off the football. So now the linebackers get to be, linebackers and get into the backfield and stop the run or get into passing lanes. And then your corners, well, they only got to go step for step for 2.5 seconds, and 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, you're sacked by Myles Garrett. That's how quickly it's going to be. And the offensive line, they can throw attention at Garrett. They can chip him with the tight end. They can shade a running back to that half of the field. But you got Zadarius Smith on the other side. And he's got 10-plus sacks in 3 out of his last 4 years. And then you got Shelby Harris coming up the middle, who casually pops off for 6 sacks every other year. Oh, and Dalvin Tomlinson, why not chime in with a few sacks of his own? And that's just the pass rush unit. We're not even talking about those 2 guys up the middle being great run stoppers as well. So Jim Schwartz, he's got all the tools in his chest, and he's going to make the most of these guys, and he is the right man for the job. So last question I want to toss your way before we get you on out of here. Do the Browns have a top 5 defensive line in your eyes? Yes or no? Give me your thoughts down in the comment section. Personally, I think they are. And I know I'm a bit biased here, no doubt about it, and this is kind of homerish coming across, but I do believe that Cleveland has a top 5 defensive line. I think they were borderline top 10 before they got Zadarius Smith. I mean, Myles Garrett by himself is going to get you pretty high up there, but here are my top 5 defensive lines in football. The Eagles last year, unless someone else gets more sacks than them, and they had a single-season sack record a year ago, they're number 1. The 49ers, they got Bosa, they got Hargrave. You got to give credit where credit is due. They're number 2. I think Cleveland slots in ahead of Pittsburgh, and they're close because you got Watt, you got Hayward, you have Highsmith, all great players. But the Browns got Myles Garrett. They got Zadarius Smith. They've got a very deep rotation, right? We're talking 5 deep across the board of Smith, Garrett, Okoronkwo, Shelby Harris, and Dalvin Tomlinson. And for shits and giggles, why not Jordan Elliott coming in as the 6th guy, right? I think Jordan Elliott as the 6th man on a defensive line is a much better suited role for him. And in that role, he can be better than what he was last year. And then Washington I have coming in at 5. They've got a lot of guys, but I don't know. I got to see Chase Young actually follow up that great rookie season this year and put together a solid outing. So I've got Washington coming in at number 5. But that's going to do it for us on today's show. Let's pick a card to wrap it up. We've got producer Matthew McCullough, big Tex, behind the camera today. Tex, what card do you want to go with?
Let me go with the 7 of spades.
7 of spades? I like it. The producers, the bad guys, they're up 3-1 over me. I got a month to try and find 2 correct cards. Otherwise, I'm in a world of trouble. I'm going to go with the Jack of Hearts. 10 of Hearts. 10 of Hearts. That will do it for us on today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your day. And most importantly, enjoy what's going to be a kick-ass season for the Browns.